All right. My name is Adolfo Romero, and today is July 6th, Monday, July 6th, 2020, and I'm here on behalf of the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program. And today I have the honor to be here with,
Isabella Oliver.
all right, Isabella Oliver. Before I begin the interview, could you please tell me a little bit about yourself? Your history, a little bit about your background.
So I'm originally from Caracas, Venezuela. That's where I was born. I came to the US in 2008, and I am 22, about to be 23, which makes me feel like really old, but I know it's really young. And I was born in September 23rd, 1997. So my family and I moved to the US, obviously because of the developing situation in Venezuela. By that point, they had kind of closed like most of the media outlets. They had nationalized some of the companies, and my parents thought it was kind of like the last chance to really get out and like establish themselves in a way that was stable, and it wasn't just kind of like a last minute, really big decision to just pick up and go because the situation wasn't tenable. So
Okay. And you guys decided to go to Miami, or was that like the first choice, or is there a
yeah,
specific reason why Miami? Or
Yeah, so my parents and I decided to move to Miami, more specifically Doral, Florida, because my mom had kind of like a support system here. Her best friend from college at the time had established a company, and she was able to provide my parents with employment, and just really like support us initially when we first got here. And because of that, they knew that Doral was kind of a very Hispanic neighborhood, specifically a very Venezuelan neighborhood. So they thought they would be kind of like the closest thing back back home. And it was the best way to kind of help me grow up in an area that had like good schools, and a culture that was similar to that back home.
okay. And so, what made you go to? I guess forwarding a little bit, what made you decide to go to UF? Is there a specific reason you chose UF?
Yeah, there's a couple of reasons. So originally, I was accepted to the like Boston University and UF, as well as like Florida International University and Florida State University. But realistically, for because of family finances and whatnot, Florida was the best choice economically, and it was really between UF and BU, and I decided that Florida was close to home. It Most of my support system was going to be there. Like I said, most of my friends from high school were going to UF, so I would have a really good sort of structure to help keep me grounded and everything. And obviously UF has like really great academics, and that was kind of just how I made the choice.
Okay. Wow. Okay, that's an interesting choice. And you just recently graduated, right?
Hmm?
And
Yes.
what was your degree on? What did you ended up studying?
Yeah, so I studied international studies with a focus on Latin American studies.
Okay, and at UF during your years over there, you joined. I noticed that you joined various organizations. Can you tell us a little bit about those organizations and what role did you play in them?
Yeah. So the first organization that I actually really joined was Alpha Phi Omega, which is a service fraternity on campus. And I joined because I was just kind of looking to get involved, and I didn't really know what would be best. And that one offered like it was the way that it was like marketed was just as an organization that provided different perspectives, a chance to do a lot of community service and kind of really get involved with the community in Gainesville. So I joined, and it wasn't kind of like the best fit for me. So I ended up joining the Hispanic Student Association, initially through their Office of Political Affairs and also through their member leadership program, which is a leadership development program for first and second years and transfer students. And then that just kind of like began my journey in like the Hispanic community at UF, and I ended up becoming president this past year of the Hispanic Student Association. So worked with it for about 3 years. It was one of the best decisions I could have made. It was really, really challenging, especially the year being president, but it was one of the most rewarding things, and I think that it really helped develop and shapes me into the person I am today. So
Okay. What type of tasks would you guys do for the community in Gainesville? What was like the focus of like the point of main focus of the organization itself? What types of projects would you do?
which one? Alpha Phi Omega?
Yes, that one and the Hispanic one, the Hispanic.
Yeah, so Alpha Phi Omega had honestly like various projects that they took part of. The ones I took part of the most was with the Humane Society. Excuse me. We did a lot of volunteering for animals, just helping the shelter, walking the dogs, cleaning, etc. I also did a lot of work with senior care facilities. So homes for the elderly, that was also really nice. So you just went, you spent a couple of hours there, you did kind of like whatever they needed. And then with HSA, we did a lot of work with not so much Gainesville community organizations or members. That was more so this past year with solidarity sessions. But we have done a lot of different drives for different communities in conjunction with the sub organizations. So like the Mexican American Student Association would have a campaign to raise funds for people separated at the border and to support families facing different issues of like immigration and things like that. So we would collaborate with them and help them raise funds, or with the Venezuelan Student Association to collect kind of non-perishable goods and ship them over to Venezuela because there's a huge food shortage, as I'm sure you're aware of. And the same thing with WEPA, which is like the Puerto Rican Student Association. So those were kind of the most active in the last couple of years. And then this past year as well, we, in conjunction with SPOB, created solidarity sessions. And so that was a series of kind of like community conversations where we would partner up with a scholar, a student, or a community organization to create a narrative and a conversation on different issues impacting the Gainesville community, but also the Hispanic and Black communities.
Okay, wow, that's a lot of work going throughout the years. So these organizations, what would you say you had like, what did you grab from them? I guess because now like you're more involved within the community, but how has that changed you and impacted you overall?
I think I realized that there is a huge disconnect between the University of Florida and the Gainesville community, and it made me really driven to see what the issues are on the ground, whether that be, you know, like here in Miami as I'm working right now as an organizer, or at UF with solidarity sessions and seeing how to bridge the gap between the institution and the community. I think it became really critical, especially this past year, of the way that UF decides to take action and what the consequences of those actions are on the overall community. You know, like we've all seen the high rises that they're building, you know, like luxury student housing and other methods of gentrification that really impact the Gainesville community that has always been there and is not necessarily tied to the university on the basis of, you know, like students, professors, or so on and so forth.
Okay, yeah, those are definitely issues that are going on in Gainesville, and they've been going on for years. How effective do you think the organizations have been at creating the change? Has it been effective like at a macro level scale, or is it you guys are working individuals, like places, small places, and try to help other communities? So how do you guys go about it?
Yeah, so I would say that we haven't significantly contributed to structural change because I think the issue is with student organizations or even departments at the university, most of the people that staff them or work within them are students. So there's a very quick turnover every 4 years or every year that a new person decides to join. Like I said before, it was not like it was my senior year that I realized kind of the intensity and the complex nature of all of these issues. And it becomes very difficult to lay out a plan that you can accomplish within a year to actually make a change at this university that has existed for literally hundreds of years. And I think the biggest contribution that we've had so far obviously is, you know, creating a home away from home for like Latino students and Hispanic students, but also creating these community conversations again, especially at the institutes, because I think there was a huge loss of identity and purpose when the institutes, the Hispanic Latino Institute and IBC closed originally, there's basically a whole generation of students that never knew that those spaces existed and what they represented in the first place. And so to me, what has the biggest impact is that these solidarity sessions started to expose all the issues that UF has, not only on like a conversational basis, but also rooted in oral history. And to me, that opened a lot of people's eyes. And I could see it when we were having conversations that these kids didn't know about these things. Like they might have thought, oh yeah, UF is a predominantly white institution. Oh yeah, there's racism within the Latinx diaspora and all these things, but how does that affect us on an everyday, but also on a structural level? Those are conversations that solidarity sessions really focused on, and it grounded that in fact, not just on, rhetoric or what have you. And I think that that is the biggest step that we could have taken at the time to ensure that that identity is kept within the institutes, and that it hopefully will live on even after Ali and I, have left SPOP. But I would say that that's one of the biggest impacts that we've had. And I see it in the way that HSA has kind of progressed in the things that they focused on and what voices they choose to uplift, especially during these times. And yeah.
Do you know what type of issues have been going on? Like you're saying, like during solidarity sessions, you would discuss issues. Could you tell us a little bit about what type of issues have students faced at UF, or what are the main topics out there?
Yeah, so some of the topics that we did for solidarity session is the first one was more than an athlete, and that was at the IBC, and it was basically a discussion surrounded kind of like the oh my gosh, I'm forgetting the word, I'm sorry. But essentially the way that the university profits off of Black and brown bodies and the ways that they use student athletes essentially to make money, because in reality, like part of the biggest reason the University of Florida is so wealthy is because of their football team and other sports teams. And a lot of times that aspect of a student's lives becomes the only one. And if I'm not mistaken, there was an athlete that actually came to the session and talked about how she couldn't pursue a certain degree in STEM because it was so time demanding or time consuming that it was cutting into her sports training times and whatnot. And the university basically told her like, hey, well, you probably are going to have to drop that major if it means that you can't make it to the trainings or you can't keep up with schoolwork. When in reality, she's there to get an education, not to contribute to just the athletic side of the University of Florida. Beyond that, I mean, I think especially right now, we're seeing the impact that racism has on like within the Hispanic and Latinx community, because there has been such a big divide in the way that Hispanics and Latinx folks perceive what's going on right now with everything with Black Lives Matter. And so really diving in and analyzing why we have those preconceived notions of race and racism in the first place was key in unpacking that entire thing, right? So that was an issue that we discussed. Another one was intimate partner violence and domestic violence, as well as healthy relationships, and what that looks like specifically in the Hispanic and Latinx community. Essentially like notions of the patriarchy and misogyny that is based around just practices that have gone on for years within Hispanic and Latino families, and that reverberate essentially throughout the lives of students right now, and will probably do so for the rest of their lives, and kind of helping navigate those spaces and how to recognize when these processes become toxic and very unhealthy for young men and women and other folks. Yeah.
Oh, wow. That is a lot of work then that you guys have been doing for the solidarity sessions.
Yeah.
So right now, currently right now, well, I guess before you graduated, we went into video, everything, Zoom meetings, everything was over Zoom. How did the COVID-19 affected you? Did it had an impact as like you thought? I mean, you guys didn't even have like a official graduation, go out there, I mean, it's just not possible. So how did that make you feel? How did you guys go about that?
Yeah, so I honestly consider myself really lucky in the midst of everything, because I have not been directly impacted in a way that really challenged my livelihood or my safety or that of my loved ones. Like you said, I was able to get a job in the middle of all this fairly quickly, and a good job at that, doing what I like. And I think that that's a privilege that not many people currently have or might have in the near future with everything that's been going on. Of course, you know, it was really disappointing to close out 4 years without having a celebration or graduation and everything. But the more I think about it, the more I think that class of 2020, you know, it got the short stick, but it also, you know, we're out before all the changes that are going to be happening next year happen. And I was able to also be at SPOB kind of like that last year, that they had the ability to really employ incredible people, incredible students. And initially I really felt supported by SPOB in transitioning from like federal work study to OPS and keeping a job until I was able to find something a little bit more stable and full-time that fit within my career. But you know, there's a lot of anger, there's a lot of disappointment, not just for me but for my fellow graduates. We definitely feel that the ending that we got was not nearly close to the ending that we deserved, and we were going to be graduating and facing all the adversity that comes with initially, but now it's like an incredibly challenging atmosphere and basically just economy that we're going into. I have had friends that had secured their dream jobs and it was taken away from them before they could even start, and now they're doing something that has nothing to do with what they initially imagined. And of course, you know, seeing that is heartbreaking. I've had, you know, friends of friends lost a loved one during all of this, and of course that's heart-wrenching, and I can't speak at all to their feelings or their experiences, but I have been very lucky that nothing like that has happened within my family or very close friend group. But I think also it has empowered me in a way and really inspired me to continue to expose the issues that the pandemic really brought to the forefront. So economic inequality, racial inequality, healthcare disparities, as you know, that Ali and I were working on for solidarity sessions, all of that has been exacerbated by the current situation. And I'm really lucky that in my work right now, I get to work on those issues still, especially within the Miami community, and really, you know, focusing on local issues and building solutions from the ground up and partnering up with local organizations.
So right now, which is the organization that you're working for, or can you tell us a little bit about the new job and what are you doing?
Yeah. So I work as a Miami-Dade organizer for, it's like a mouthful, but I'm the Miami-Dade organizer for the Theory of Change program with Florida for All. And Florida for All is essentially like a very big coalition of 7 organizations across the state of Florida. And it essentially just really envisions kind of a new state that focuses on the needs of different communities, especially minority communities and communities of color, and how to push the state in a more progressive way and to build connections on the ground instead of from the top down.
Do you guys build, how do you guys reach out to people, or like what type of projects do you guys work on?
Yeah, so my job specifically in Theory of Change, kind of like the goal for the program, is essentially to build that space where people come together and discuss. So my entire job is basically to be the person behind the scenes who recognizes different organizations that might be potentially aligned with the values of Florida for All, that they're a strategic partnership or they represent like a very key constituency that we feel might be untapped or is not being mobilized enough in order to like actually create a change electorally or otherwise, or civically. And we essentially are like a center for pulling those people together, getting them to the table, creating kind of a network of resources that might be useful for whatever goals they're trying to accomplish. And we help them visualize in the long term what structural change looks like. So, you know, you have like coronavirus and Black Lives Matter and county elections, and then the federal elections are coming up, and those are issues that are very in the now. but they represent decades, if not centuries, of issues that our communities have faced. And so theory of change really hunkers down on the ability to use the current moment to build structural and long-term change. So it's really like making sure that we are organizing around issues that matter, and of course that matter now with everything that has been happening, but that pushes forward and doesn't, that keeps, essentially that it keeps folks committed to continue to work on these issues in the long term.
Especially right now with the upcoming election, the state of Florida is talking about border suppression. And yeah, those are real issues that are happening. So definitely that's something to think about and find solutions, like reach out, do more community outreach to the communities. I wanted to ask you. So I saw that you had come out in the Time 100 as part of the inaugural Rising Stars program. Could you explain a little bit about that? That's really, I
Yeah.
thought it was really interesting. So I'm like,
Thanks. Yeah, so the Time 100 Summit kind of happens every year, and it's a place where they recognize kind of like the top leaders in each industry, whether that be like the music industry or like entertainment or nonprofit or political or business, et cetera, et cetera. But they launched essentially a youth version of that this year, and they were recognizing top people in the business, nonprofit, and student leadership. And UF, I think, was chosen to be one of the participating institutions. And my mentor, who was the assistant vice president of student affairs, nominated me. And then I applied, and then I was accepted. So essentially what that means is it was supposed to happen in April, but because of COVID, it's going to be rescheduled to September. I don't know if it's actually going to happen, but it's the opportunity to go to the Time 100 Summit and be part of like different roundtables with like really significant people. And I think it's a really great opportunity to expand my network and kind of like my leadership in those circles and create kind of a new platform for issues that we're facing. I think it's going to be really interesting to see how they put that together with like Black Lives Matter and COVID and all the other issues that are going on right now. But yeah, I'm super grateful that I even got considered to be nominated, and even more grateful that I actually got accepted. It was really random. One day my mentor was like, "Oh, can you come to my office?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." And I go and she's like, "Do you want to like do this?" And I was like, "I mean, that looks amazing," because she knew that I wanted to work in like nonprofits and things like that. And she was like, "Oh, well, I'm just going to nominate you because I think you're great. And I think this could be really good for you." And I was like, "Okay." And then it happened. So
yeah, wow. So going back a little bit to back in time, back at UF, when I saw that you were the chief of staff for the student government.
mhm.
Like a lot, student government has been getting a lot of issues. There's a lot of things happening there. Could you explain and elaborate a little bit about the issues, controversial that have been going on and are still going on?
Yeah, for sure. So to be completely honest with you, I did not enjoy my time in student government at all. It was a great opportunity, and I thought that I could affect real change. But at the end of the day, I was very limited by the things I could do on the people around me. And sadly, the people around me were not, they didn't have their eye on the ball, essentially, to create like real change. And I don't think they were very committed to enacting that change in the first place. And I think that that has been one of the biggest issues that student government has faced and continues to face, just because of the structure and the way that things go down essentially there. And I think it's incredibly elitist. I think very exclusive, as well as the fact that I don't think our communities are equally represented at all. And I don't think that the decisions that are made, for the most part, and of course there have been exceptions, but they are meant to keep UF the way it's always been. And I have not really seen a push for progress in the way that needs to be done in an institution like UF. And obviously that was very evident last year with the president that we had and the different changes that were done. The structural funding changes at UF were not as a result of the president that we had or anything like that. It was because of a lawsuit. But I think that the way that UF could have supported, and specifically student government could have supported its organizations, was really up to the leaders in that whole area, and they actively chose not to do it over and over again. And that's the issue. That's a huge part of the issue, that they decide not to be there for the students that they represent. And while there's a lot of politics involved, and obviously like what I'm saying right now is not nearly the tip of the iceberg, I think that, you know, like a lot of it gets shrouded in like political disagreements and drama and all these things, when in reality, like there's very real steps that people could take to actually make a change, and they choose not to, because I think because of the way that UF is structured.
So to create some type of change within the student government, what would you say they need to do? Is this something that UF itself has to implement, or is it the people that get voted into these positions?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think both. I think there needs to be a real bridge built between like UF administration and student leaders, whether that be in student government or different organizations like HSA. I think that there's a huge disconnect in the bridge. Well, there's just a huge disconnect there. I don't think there's a bridge for them to be able to come together and actively work on solutions, because to want to work, like for you to have solutions and work together, you want to have to do that. And a lot of the times, especially last year, I would say that didn't happen, not because people might not have wanted to necessarily, but because of all the issues that we were facing over and over again. So in the beginning of like the summer and the fall was the structural changes, then Donald Trump Jr. came to campus, and then COVID hit. So like, even if there had been a really solid ground for collaboration and to listen to students and actually affect that change, it was really challenging because of everything that happened. I think polarizes a lot of people, and that difficults the conversation even more because of the way that UF administration is structured. It's predominantly white, predominantly male, and predominantly older. And when things like that happen, students want a very visible and very quick kind of like, you know, take the foot down type of change, but administration won't do those things. And then that's, I think, where part of the really big break happens, and where everybody's left to pick up the pieces.
Okay, no, yeah, that makes sense. So now that you're back in Miami, how is your experience, or how do you see like the COVID situation playing over there than here in Gainesville? Do you see like there's a big difference the way that it's being treated over there versus here, preventative wise?
Yeah, I think Miami's a mess.
Yeah.
Miami-Dade has had like the highest numbers consistently of COVID. Their communities, specifically like Little Haiti, Alapata, and other areas, have been kind of like the epicenters within Miami-Dade, because it's a lot of like brown and black communities and lower income communities, and the state hasn't done anything really to support them. And the way that I believe the Miami-Dade the Miami-Dade mayor and Miami mayor and everything have handled things has not been a closure and effective kind of decision making that needs to be done, because as we have seen, the cases keep rising, and there's a lot of times where you go out and people don't have masks, and there's even more times where I think like the Miami-Dade County mayor was seen at like one of the restaurants that violated like the COVID regulations in the first place.
Wow.
And yeah, exactly. So it's just been like really difficult, I think, for like the actual local government leadership to put their foot down and establish something that would protect the people in Miami-Dade. And it's really sad because I think a lot of people aren't going to keep cooperating with like COVID guidelines because it might not interest them, they might not think that they're affected, or they don't worry about like social collective responsibility. But then I think it's up to local government officials to really enforce that, because at the end of the day, we're just going to keep getting dug into this hole. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's practically what's happening. Cases are not getting any better.
And I think, so they're closing down again. So restaurants are being forcefully shut down only for delivery or takeout. Gyms and like party venues and all of that are closing again in Miami-Dade because there has been such a huge uprising in cases.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. So you were also part of the, I guess, the summer intern at the Women Political Leaders. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so that was great. That was when I studied abroad in Brussels, Belgium. So it was half a class and then half an internship. And it was really cool because that internship basically focuses on the advancement of female leadership in political levels, like at every political level worldwide. And I still am like friends with some of the people that I met in that internship. And it was like one of the most diverse places where I ever worked. I was working with people from like Iran, Brazil, Ecuador, Seychelles, which is like a very small island off the coast of Africa, which is just like crazy. But yeah, it was like a really great experience. I got to do a lot of work. Essentially, I think it's essentially like organizing. It's just like bringing people together to talk about like different agendas, about how to best support women at a worldwide level, no matter the level of government that they enter, and to really foster like female presence in the political world. I felt super respected. I felt that my opinion was really valued, and I think that that spoke to a lot to the type of organization that it is.
I guess in that organization, how were you able to? I guess that's because you're saying that that's practically like at a national, global level, like the way that protect the rights, women's rights. What would you bring from what you've learned to our local levels, like more like city, municipalities? What advice can you give us or provide for us
on female leadership?
Yeah, female.
Okay. I don't know if I'm like qualified to give this advice out. I mean, I just think education and economic opportunity are two of the biggest factors in really making sure that women have their own voice and their independence and choice over their lives. Of course, there are millions of other factors that will impact that, but I think those are the very basic things that we need to make sure that women have access to, because it can determine a lot of things about their lives. And there needs to, in my education and other things that I have kind of like been exposed to, women won't necessarily advocate for women, right? And I think that for women to really flourish in local government, in society, and whatever, everybody needs to be an advocate for women, whether if you're a woman, a non-binary person, or a man. That is something that is really key, because a lot of times women aren't at the table and they might need someone to open the door for them to have a seat at the table as well. That's been some of the biggest things that I've learned. And I think that making sure that wherever you go, you are an advocate for women is one of the biggest things as well.
Yeah, no, that's a great answer. That's, yeah, excellent. So what do you envision, like within the next 10 years, Florida to become?
Oh boy, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I think Florida is like a very weird entity. It's funny because people say that South Florida is like a completely different state, and a part of me like doesn't really think so, because I think that there's a lot of people in South Florida who hold the same kind of values that people in North Florida say that that's the reason why they're so different. I hope that Florida really becomes a state where minorities are protected and where they're supported to the same level to its white counterpart, and that it also becomes a state that doesn't use prison labor anymore for 50 cents an hour. Just those kind of things and those kind of policies are ridiculous to have in the first place in any state, not just Florida. But I really hope that some of the most arcane and inhumane laws that Florida has right now are overturned, and I think that can make a really big difference for society down the line in 10 years. I think, for example, the restoring voting rights to former felons, only 4 counties out of like 67 in Florida have actually started to create a process for that to happen. You've seen like a huge push from like the governor and Tallahassee to not grant them that voting right that was passed by law, essentially. And so it's things like that. It's things that are supposed to be in action and in practice that the law promises, but don't actually take place in everyday lives. I think that would make one of the biggest differences in Florida to become a better place for people.
Yeah. I mean, what would you like for people to understand, and what can they do to help out more the communities?
I think, you know, if you're able to and you're eligible, I think voting is one of the biggest things, especially in local elections, even more so. I mean, voting is equally important across all parts, but I really think that people discount local elections as being useless when in reality they're the ones that affect your everyday lives the most. Like I said before, even the fact that like the Miami-Dade County mayor won't take the necessary steps or create the necessary resources to protect his community speaks volumes to what that person, or like what this picture would look like if it was someone else who was willing to do those things. And that's a direct result of voting in local elections. The same thing with the county commission, the same thing across like different city commissions all over Miami-Dade County. And that's I would say being informed is one of the biggest things in order to make an educated decision. But also getting out there in your community. Miami-Dade has such a huge kind of like civic, you know, scene, and like different organizations that are really trying to make a change that I never knew existed until I actually started this job. And they're all trying to do really great work. And I think knowing that and knowing how you can support that, even if you don't work for them or you don't actively engage in those issues, is really key. Yeah.
All right. Let me see. So I guess this is almost like concluding the interview, but is there anything else that you would like to add or say a comment on? Maybe like an advice for the next upcoming generation that's entering UF, especially during the climate right now with everything that's going on? What advice would you be able to provide to them as an alumni?
I would say to never be afraid to do the right thing. You know, in involvement circles, that line can be very blurred, even though you know, like obviously what the right thing to do is. You think that there's such a huge constraint on the basis of like, oh, well, this organization has always done this, or they expect me to do this, and they expect me to act that way, or whatever. And I think one of the biggest things I learned was that it doesn't matter. Like those things don't matter and won't ever matter out here in the real world. What matters is like the choices that you make, and what that impacts the way that you see yourself and the way that others see you. And I was one of those people. I was like always really afraid of like, oh my God, like if I make just a decision, like how is that going to shape out in different ways and with different people. And I wish I would have gotten over that fear of what would happen, because in reality what matters the most is making the decision that you think is right for you, and doing things that will bring you inner peace and that you know will contribute to other people's lives.
Okay. What are you proud of as a Latinx resident in Florida?
Oh my gosh. Okay. I am really proud of the fact that I think we're making progress. I know a lot of people might not think so, but you know, like I think having solidarity sessions is progress. Like I think having a conversation with my mom about certain racial issues is progress. And I think that while there has been a huge pushback on you know, like differences across different communities and different aspects, I feel like especially right now is a moment where people are trying their best to engage in conversations that will be fruitful along the way, because I think that refusing to even have that conversation completely shuts the door that you might have not have known was possible to open in the first place. So yeah.
No, yeah. I mean, yeah, it's a long run. We're in a long road ahead of us, but it's not an easy thing, but we're getting there. Well, Isa, I would like to thank you, and I'm not sure if you want to say one last thing or
I'm okay.
you're okay. All right.
Thank you
Well,
for reaching
thank
out.
you
This
for your
is
time and
cool.
having us. Yeah, this is awesome, and you're our very first one, so you're in our collection. So you're gonna be part of it. So thank you so much, and
Cool.
appreciate your time.
Of course. Good luck, everybody. Stay
All right.
safe.
Bye bye.
Bye.